Awesome. Well, today we're going to be talking about invoicing and everything that has to do with invoicing. And so because we're talking about everything that has to do with invoicing, there are some areas where I won't go into too much detail because we have a lot of other help articles on how to get those things set up properly. But I do want to cover everything so that you guys have an idea of how invoicing works, the different things that you can do, tips and tricks, and all that good stuff. So let me go ahead and share my screen, and we will jump in and get started here. Beautiful. So let me go to my outline, and we'll start up here at the top and start working our way through everything. Awesome. So number one, we're going to start with just getting set up in Dubsado. So we're going to talk about the brand settings or getting started with invoicing in Dubsado. So we're going to talk about brand settings first. So the first thing we're going to talk about is connecting your payment processor in Dubsado. Very straightforward, one of the first things that we'll do here. Now, if you connect your payment processor, you're going to do that in the settings menu up here in the top right-hand corner. And then in this section is going to be where you set up a lot of your normal brand settings, your email, and all that good stuff. But where you're going to go to set up your payment processor is underneath the Receive Money tab right here. And in this section, it's going to give you these three different processors. Now, you might see this screen here. If you're first getting into Dubsado, you might see this screen where you'll need to set up your base country and the currency that you want to receive in. Currently, right now, we only do one currency per brand, but you can message our chat support team and they can tell you about how we can implement ways to help you if you do bill in multiple currencies. But right now, per brand, we only offer one currency per brand right now. But once you have that set up and then you click the save button, it's going to take you to this page here. These are the three different processors that we have. So we integrate with Stripe, Square, and with PayPal. And with this, as you can kind of see on the outline here, I'll come back. With these three different processors, the credit card, if you want to do that option, is $2.9 plus 30 cents. It's just that standard processing fee. Dubsado doesn't take anything off the top of that. So any processing fees that you might have is just going to only be through whatever payment processor you're using. It's just those standard fees. There's not really a way to get around those at all, but Dubsado doesn't take anything else off the top. ACH, so if you wanted to do ACH payments, that's going to be more of like checking and savings where you can do it through your bank and they can put in their bank information and have it come out through there. That's going to be, the fee is going to be 0.8% of the invoice total, and it's only a $5 maximum per transaction. So that also might be a great way to do it. Currently right now though, with our system and linking up through Square and Stripe, ACH is only available in the US currently. So just take that into consideration if you're linking up your payment processor. You might have to go with the credit card option there. But that's going to be how you set up those different payment processors is through there. And then the second thing I have here is to set up gratuity. So once you have these set up here and you're connected, you'll then be taken to a place where you can set up your gratuity. I don't have a payment processor set up in this brand, but your gratuity can also be set up once you link up your processor. So we do have the ability to have your clients add gratuity to the transactions as well. So you can set that up in this receive money area. And then the third thing is going to be editing the invoice settings. Since we're already here, I want to talk about the flexibility that we have to customize invoice templates. And so if we go into the same page here, so we're still on Receive Money tab inside the brand settings, there's also another tab on the right-hand side here that says Invoices. And with our invoices, we do have a little bit of limited flexibility for right now as far as how much you can customize, but that is something that we're working on right now. And so we want to make our invoicing templates and the different things you can do as far as customizing your invoices. We want to expand on that. And so that's something that the development team is working on currently. But right now we'll talk about the three things that you can do with the invoice templates. The first thing is you can decide whether or not you want the tax column to show up. And so that's just an on-off switch. If you want the tax to show, you can do that and have that in there, or you can shut that off. The other thing that you can do as well is you can decide whether you want the client's actual name on the invoice in the to area, or if you want it to be the company name that shows up. And so you can decide there, and these are global settings, by the way. So this is going to be for every invoice that goes out. If you don't want the client's name on there and you'd rather have the company name on there, then you can select that box, and then on every invoice, it would be the company name that shows up there. And then the third thing is going to be edit terms. If we click into here, what the terms are is on the invoice, you can decide to put in terms or text that you can write on the actual invoice that will go out to every client. Sometimes it's best if you want to put in bank information that you want them to pay through a specific way that's not in line with Stripe, Square, PayPal. You can do that there. And so that's going to be in the Invoices tab underneath the Receive Money section. So that's how you can edit the terms there. The second thing we're going to talk about here, number 2, we're going to move through here, is the integration section. And so we're still in the brand settings. And so if you are following along, that's up here in the top right-hand corner. We're going to go down a few tabs here to the integration section. And with Dubsado, as you can see over here on the right-hand side, we do have a QuickBooks integration where you can link up a QuickBooks Online account. And how it works in Dubsado is whenever you have an invoice that gets created in Dubsado and then a payment is received on that invoice, that information can be transferred over into your QuickBooks Online account. And so with that, it is only a one-way sync. I'll go back to the outline here. And how it works is it's only from Dubsado to QuickBooks. We don't have a way at the moment to bring in QuickBooks information into Dubsado. It's only a one-way sync right now. So that means that as you're invoicing through Dubsado, let's say you're linked up with Stripe, and then you send somebody an invoice and then you receive a payment on that invoice, that information can then get transferred over into your QuickBooks account. So that's how our integration works. We do have a few more help articles on that, so I won't go into tremendous detail because we have a lot to cover today. But if you are wondering, we do integrate with QuickBooks, and it's a one-way sync from Dubsado over into your QuickBooks account. That way you don't have to re-enter information into your QuickBooks account. It'll just be that one-way sync there. And then the other thing, we do get a lot of questions about this, so I wanted to make sure that I cover this in this webinar. Upcoming integrations that we do have as far as invoicing goes and for accounting and all of that is Wave and Xero are the two things that the two platforms that we're planning on integrating with in the near future. That's actually something that our development team is in the process of working on. So it's not something that's way off in the distance. It's something that's coming up fairly soon. So those of you who do use those two platforms, that's something that's coming up fairly soon. So just wanted to clear the air on that in case you guys did know if we integrated with them. Not quite yet, but it is coming. And so one thing that I wanted to do here, I wanted to take a brief pause in the action, and I have a poll that's going to pop up for you guys on the big marker area. And I just wanted to know, and I'm going to pull this up here, of which invoice service have you primarily used in the past. And so I wanted to see if that's going to work and see if that poll will pop up there. And so if that does pop up on your end, I just want to get a good idea of which ones you're using, if it's QuickBooks, Wave, Xero, and then you can just go ahead and write that in there whenever that pops up. And that way we can collect some good information from you guys there. Awesome. So we'll continue to move through here. Number 3 is going to be how we're going to talk about prepping to start invoicing. And so now we're going to kind of get into the nitty-gritty of invoicing and how this is all going to work. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about setting up your chart of accounts. Now, this is optional. You don't have to do this, but I did want to cover it because it does relate to invoicing. And so if we go into the system here, and we go underneath the reporting section. The reporting section is going to be where you can access kind of all of your accounting type information. So transactions, invoices, your profit and losses, all of that good stuff is going to be in the reporting section. And so if we go down to chart of accounts here, this is going to be where you can set up your different income and expense categories. Now, I won't go into too much detail on this because there's not necessarily a right or a wrong way to do this. It kind of depends on your business. But the reason that you want to set up income categories is because when we're going to build our packages here in a second, you do have the ability to add an income category. So if someone does purchase one of your services, it goes into the correct category. So at the end of the year, if you want to export a profit and loss sheet, you can do that from this area here. And so you can see where your income is coming from and also the different expense categories that you have too as well. So that is one thing that if you do want to set that up, I did include it in the outline that you can set up your income and expense categories here. And that's going to prep you for whenever you get into packages, you can add those in there. So just wanted to cover that really quickly. The create your packages section. So now we're going to get into actually building your services. And one thing that I usually recommend doing, especially when you're first getting into Dubsado, if you're brand new, is to go in and build your packages first. Go in and kind of set up your services and set up the things that you offer or that you're going to charge your clients with. So let's talk about building packages. So if we go underneath the template section here in Dubsado and then go down here to where you see the word packages, we'll click into there. So what are your packages? Your packages are going to be your services, the goods that you offer, the things that you're going to bill your clients with that have a price point attached to them. And so how you're going to build your packages, most likely, now there are some certain situations where it won't line up like this, but primarily you're going to build your packages as individual packages. Your add-ons can be considered packages. If you have, as you can see, like different levels of packages, all those are going to be separate. I'll show you why here in a second whenever we get into actually building an invoice, but you're going to go through here and you're going to build out all of the different things that you offer. Some people in some businesses have what would be considered thousands of different packages. In that case, you don't have to set them up as packages in here. This is only if you have things that have fixed price points to them that you want to be able to use to build your invoices quickly or to be able to add to proposals. So the packages, a great analogy that I like to use is you can kind of think about your packages as the different food items that you would offer at a restaurant. And then the proposal that we have in Dubsado is like the menu. So you can take these packages and you can put them on the proposal for your clients to choose and select from. So if they do go into a proposal, they can select all of these as individual packages. And so that's how you can kind of go through and start to think about, okay, so what are the services that I offer? What are the different items that I offer? I want to create these as different package templates that I can use on proposals or I can add to invoices. And like I said, when we get into the invoices, you'll see how the packages really relate to invoices. So you can kind of start to brainstorm how you want to set up your packages if you haven't done that yet. So the packages are going to be in this area. You can go ahead and get those set up there. The discounts area. So this is something that's newer to Dubsado. You do have the ability to create discount templates, if you will. And so if we click on this tab here, there's a discounts area and you can create all the different discount codes that you want in here. And so I have one set up right now. It's just 50% off. That's the name of it. And it's a percentage-based discount. You can also do fixed dollar discounts if you would like to. And so that's a value of negative 50%, obviously. And then you can create a code that you can have your clients enter in, and it will be like a coupon code that whenever they get to the invoice, they can enter in that code and it would take off that percentage. They can do that through the proposal process, all of those cool things. I won't get into too much detail on that, but you can come in here and create your discount codes here and then apply those to invoices, or they can be used through proposals and how you can accept payment and whatnot there. So I have that 50% off there. I'll show you how to use that here in a second. And so packages and discounts, go ahead and go through and get those different things set up there. And so the next thing we'll talk about is creating your payment schedules. So if we go into the template section, again, we're going to go down 2 sections here to the payment schedules. payment schedules are going to be a way that you can create a template on how and when and how much and when you want your client to pay. So if there's a certain way that you want your client to pay, so let's say that 50% is required up front, 50% is due at a later time, or maybe you require $300 down and then the rest is due, 2 days before their actual event. Anytime you have that type of a setup where you require a certain amount down and then maybe a month later this much is required and then a week before their wedding something is due there. Whenever you're kind of talking about that structure of how you want to get paid, that's going to be where your payment schedules come in. And in this section here, you can create all different types of payment schedules. So you don't have to just stick to one. You can create different types that you can add to proposals. You can add them to workflows. You can add them to invoices. And so a couple of them that I have here, I have one that is $300 down, and then 2 weeks before the event, the rest is due. And again, I don't want to get too deep into payment schedules because we're covering such a broad range of how you're going to go about invoicing, but we do have, some help articles on payment schedules. We have some videos on there. So feel free to check those out to get a little bit more deeper information on payment schedules. But I have a 25% that's due. So basically, each month here, 25% of the invoices due there. And then I have a 50-50 package. And then I also have one that has to do with recurring invoices, which we'll cover in a little while when we get into the recurring invoices section. But the payment schedule area, just as a whole, is going to be where you can go in and just create those different templates on how you want your client to pay and also how much and when. That's how you can kind of think about your payment schedules. So those two things we recommend doing, or I guess three things if you include the chart of accounts, but go through, set up your chart of accounts. If you have different income categories you want to add in there, you can then add those to your packages. So if someone were to purchase one of your packages, you can line that up with it goes into this income category. So you can see, oh, I made this much money with this package. So set up your chart of accounts, go through, set up your packages, and then also go in and set up your payment schedules. So once you have those three things done, now you're really ready to go in and start invoicing. You don't have to get those things set up. You could go into an invoice and just create things on the fly if you need to invoice immediately. You don't have to set up your packages. But if you're not in a rush to start invoicing, I recommend going in, get your packages set up, get all your services together, and then get your payment structure set up as well. My apologies here. People are trying to call me right now. Awesome. So that's number 3, to prep to start invoicing there. And so now we're going to kind of get into the meat of this webinar, which is going to be describing the different types of invoices that we have and how you can look at it and decide how you want to invoice your clients. So now that you have everything set up, we're going to talk about the 2 different invoice types that we have in Dubsado. We have one-time invoices and we have recurring invoices. And so I'm going to go through and kind of talk about the differences between those. Let me grab a quick drink of water here. Awesome. Sorry about that. I just wanted to clear my voice a little bit. Awesome. So let's talk about the 2 different types of invoices. We're going to start with one-time invoices, and I'll show you how to build those as well so you can see, but I'll kind of walk through the different descriptions for one-time invoices here if you guys are following along. So one-time invoices are going to be best to divide one total sum of payment into multiple payments using one invoice. A perfect example, I laid this out here, is let's say you have one invoice that's $5,000. They might have chosen, your main package. They have some add-ons in there, but it totals up to $5,000, and that's one invoice that you have for the client. Now you want to divide that up into different payments. So you have $1,000 that's due up front of that $5,000, and then the remaining balance is due a week before the event. We kind of talked about the payment schedules, and you can set up the different payment templates there. But that's how you're going to kind of look at one-time invoices. If that's how you invoice your client, where there's one invoice there's a total for the invoice, and then it's broken down into different payments and they pay at different times, that's going to be considered a one-time invoice. And I'll show you how to build that here in a second. So some guidelines and tips. And when you read through these, you can kind of think about if this is going to fit your business better, or maybe when we get to recurring invoices, you'll say that's actually how I want to start invoicing. So some guidelines and tips for using one-time invoices. It's going to be one invoice with multiple payments. So that's how you can think about it there. It's best to use if your payments change or vary in any way, shape, or form. So what I mean by that is maybe 25% is due at one time, and then the remainder is due at another time. The dollar amounts are going to be different. The way that they pay might be a little bit different. Anytime those payments are going to change at all, so $1,000 is due here, then $4,000 is due at this time, that's going to be when you're going to use a one-time invoice, because our recurring invoices is going to be the exact same amount charged every single time. So if you have that type of a payment structure, you're going to want to do a one-time invoice. Also, another thing with the one-time invoices, the public URL for the invoices, and I'll show you that here in a second too when we jump over back into Dubsado, but our one-time invoices have public URL links where you can take that link and send it to anybody, so anybody can make a payment on that invoice, and including you as the business owner. So if you're in a situation where you have to be able to enter in the payment information for a client, then what I would recommend doing is setting up a one-time invoice, so that way you can go in and make payments and put in the credit card information for the client. So the URLs for our invoices are public, so that way you can send that out to, maybe if a bride's parents are paying for a wedding or something like that, you can send those out. The one-time invoices can be implemented through using workflows. So if you're at the workflow stage and you're saying, hey, I want to send an invoice out to a client, that's referring to a one-time invoice that's in the project, just a singular invoice. You can also have that connected with proposals. So if you're familiar with our system, you can do a proposal, a contract, and an invoice together. That invoice at the end of that proposal, contract, invoice sequence is considered a one-time invoice. So as we jump into recurring invoices, you're not able to start recurring invoices from a proposal or from workflows at the moment. So anytime you're talking about invoicing through workflows or through proposals, those are all considered to be just one-time invoices. And the other thing too, just in case you are needing this, if you are using a one-time invoice, and we'll take that same example, let's say you're doing an invoice that's $5,000 and it's divided up into multiple payments on that one invoice, we don't have an AutoPay feature for that specific sequence. We do have AutoPay for recurring invoices, and we'll get into that in a second. But if you are using just those one-time invoices, there's not a way to do the AutoPay feature yet. I know we are going to be making some changes to how we do invoicing, so hopefully that's something that can be added in possibly. But at the moment right now, you're not able to use AutoPay if you're just doing just a one-time invoice and sending that out to the client. And so let's jump into a project. I'm going to show you how all this ties in together. So if I go into a project, and we'll jump over into a project here. And if you're not familiar with Dubsado and the projects area, in order to invoice somebody, you'll have to set up a project, because all of the communication that you do with the client all rolls through a project. The forms that you send, the invoicing, all that good stuff. So if we go to the Invoices tab up at the top, and I'm inside of a project right now, this is going to be where all of the invoices live for this specific project. You can kind of think about the project as the client folder. It holds all the information, all the forms, the workflows run through here. It keeps track of your appointments in the project, emails, invoices, everything. So when we click on the Invoices tab, you'll see right here where it says Invoice List. When you click on this, this is going to show you all of the invoices that are a part of this project. You could have 7, 8, 9 invoices in the project, especially if you're doing recurring invoices. All of those different invoices will all show here. But let's say we're going to set up a one-time invoice. We're just going to send an invoice out to the client. When I click Add, and I'll click on that there. This is going to bring up an invoice template. Okay. Now, this is going to help because we already talked about packages and we talked about payment schedules already. So now you'll be able to understand where all this fits together. When you go to create an invoice, there's two sections that you can look at whenever it comes to an invoice. There's the line item area, which is up here. And then there's the payment schedule area, which is down here below. The line item area up here is going to be what you are charging the client. What are you charging the client for? What service, what goods are you charging the client for? The payment schedule area is going to determine how much they need to pay and when they need to pay. So you have to have both of those areas set up to make a complete invoice if you want there to be due dates on there and all of that good stuff. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about the line item area. Now, if you don't have packages created, you can still create an invoice. What you can do is you can click this button that says new line item, and you can come in here and you can build a line item that will go onto the invoice. So you can put in what the title is, a description of that. By the way, this is what you do when you create packages. So if you have your packages built, this kind of progresses you a little bit quicker to adding these to the invoice. But you can choose the quantity, the price. You can add tax to this line item. If you have discounts activated, you can choose whether that discount applies to that line item. And you can also choose your category. Now, the category is stemming from the chart of accounts. So if you do have all that set up, then you can see how building these line items will just move a little bit quicker. But what I'm going to do, because I have packages built, is if I click this packages drop down, this is going to give me a list of all of the different packages that I've created. Now, if you do have your packages set up, what you can do is you can now click on these and you can start building out an invoice really quickly. So there is a benefit to having packages built beforehand. If you're in a situation where you say, I want to build I want to build invoices quickly, go ahead and set up those packages. And as you can see, I can just start adding things onto this invoice because it's already pre-built. So that's where your packages come into play. So as you can see here, there's the name of the actual line item. Here's a description there, the category. So right now it says uncategorized. If you have your chart of accounts built, then that is going to be associated with whatever category you want it to be associated with. The quantity, if you have a discount that's applied, which by the way, what I'm going to do here really quickly is I'm going to select my 50% off discount and it's going to apply it to the invoice there. So if you do have a discount on there and you want to add it, it'll put it on all of the line items in the invoice. If there's any tax that's included, you can see that there, the price and the subtotal. One thing I will say, because sometimes I've seen this on calls, so just a quick tip if you guys are doing invoicing, how the subtotal gets generated is it takes the quantity times the price, and that gives you your subtotal. So you have to always have at the very minimum a quantity of 1. If this is 0, it's going to take 0 times 1,000 and you're going to see 0 as your subtotal. So if you're running into an issue where you have the price in there, but you're not seeing anything at the bottom, make sure you have at very minimum a quantity of 1, because that's how our invoicing is set up, is the quantity times the price equals the subtotal. So just a quick tip, if you guys are noticing that when you're doing invoicing, that's probably what's going on there. Now, let's say that you don't want to have the discount applied to every line item. What you can do is, if I were to edit this line item, you can decide here if you want to shut off the discount for that certain line item. So that's how you can decide what gets discounted and what doesn't. So if you guys are having any questions about that, that's how you can set that up there. So let's say that I've added in all of my different line items there. The next thing is adding a payment schedule. So I'm actually going to take off these discounts here, and I'm going to remove the discount off of this one. So if I have my discounts removed, now that I have a total of $1,600, that's the overall package price. Remember, we're talking about one-time invoices. So this whole invoice is $1,600. Now I want to divide this into 2 payments, let's say 50 and 50. So if I click the payment schedules button, now I'm going to get a list of all of the templates that I have for payment schedules. So I can choose now how I want to divide this up. So that's why if you have your packages and your payment schedules together, now it's going to be really easy for you to just add those in there. So let's say we want to do 50-50, and it's going to divide that payment up into 2 equal payments. So that's going to be the 2 sections on OneTime Invoices. It has the invoice total, and then it divides it into however many different payments that client needs to do. Now, I'm going to pull up a preview of this invoice. We're going to talk about this later, but if I pull up a preview of this invoice, this is what it's going to end up looking like to the client, where they have the total amount here and it's divided into different payments. And when you have your payment processor set up, there's going to be pay now buttons next to each one of these so they can choose which payment they want to make. So this is where I'm saying that you have one invoice with one invoice total, and it's divided into different payments on that invoice. So hopefully that makes sense when we're talking about how a one-time invoice works. Now we're going to jump into recurring invoices, and this is an area where we get a lot of calls about how to set this up. So I want to break this down in this webinar too. So hopefully this helps you out as well. So recurring invoices are best used for any subscription type services where it's like monthly website maintenance, social media management, monthly coaching services. Anytime where you're going to be billing the client the exact same amount all the time, that's when you're going to use recurring invoices. So let's talk about some of the guidelines and tips for this so you can understand how it's going to work. With recurring invoices, it's going to be multiple invoices with the same payment each time. So that's the big glaring difference between just a one-time invoice versus recurring invoices. The one-time invoice has one invoice, multiple payments on that invoice. The recurring invoices is multiple invoices. So they'll get a brand new invoice every single time, and it's going to be the exact same payment each time. So that's the big difference between the two of those. With the recurring invoice, you are able to utilize the AutoPay feature. And so if you do need AutoPay, if it's an absolute, I have to have AutoPay set up, then you're going to need to use recurring invoices for this. With this here, with the AutoPay feature, one guideline with this is you can do AutoPay with Square and with Stripe. You're not able to do it with PayPal at the moment, only with Square and Stripe. And it is credit card only. So you're not able to do automatic bank transfers, the ACH that we talked about in the beginning. You're not able to do that with AutoPay at the moment. It's only with credit cards that it will actually work. So take that into consideration if you're using the AutoPay feature with Dubsado. And as I'm running through this, we are planning on updating all of this. So if you're saying, oh, well, I'll never be able to use this, we are planning on making a lot of big improvements to our recurring invoice system. So just bear with us. We're going to be making some changes to it, but this is just currently how the system is set up. So that's the AutoPay feature. Now, how the AutoPay works. The AutoPay is initiated on the client's end. So currently we don't have a way for a business owner to start a recurring invoice and do the AutoPay feature right from the beginning. How it works is, and I'll click this to enhance this a little bit here. How it works is whenever a client receives their first invoice, they'll have the ability to do an AutoPay for future invoices option there. It's a button that they'll click on. And what that is it works a lot like an authorized checkbox. It makes it basically say, yes, I as the client am saying it's okay for you to charge my card from here on out. So it is required that they check that box in order for the AutoPay to work. Like I said, we do want to get it set up where the business owner can just start an AutoPay, but right now it's just on the client end. If they don't check that off on the first invoice that goes out to them, they can select that on the next one. So it's not one and done, but they will need to select that if you do want AutoPay to continue. So that's how it'll work as far as getting that AutoPay set up. The client will click that whenever they pay their first invoice. The other thing as well, the recurring invoice can only go out to the primary client. So you're not able to send recurring invoices out to different people. The recurring invoice right now can only be sent out to the primary client. Recurring invoice, the email that goes out. So a lot of people might say, well, when the recurring invoices are sending, where is that coming from? If you go underneath templates and canned emails, and then click on the edit template. So we'll jump in there in a second. But if you go to templates, canned emails, edit templates, the send invoice email is the email that goes out to the client. So if I click in here, I'll go to templates, canned emails, and then go up here to edit templates. These templates right here are the default templates that happen whenever this certain action happens. So send invoice, whenever an invoice is going out to the client, in this case, the recurring invoice, this is the template that will always go out to the client. So if you want to reframe this, if you're doing recurring invoicing and you want to restructure this email, this is the email that goes out to the clients each time. So just be aware of that. But that's going to be the email that goes out to the client. So I just wanted to make sure that you guys were aware of that. The other thing with this as well, we kind of already talked about this, but for the outline, I just wanted to include this. The recurring invoices cannot be initiated within workflows or proposals at the moment. So that's only those one-time invoices. There are ways where you can just create a to-do for yourself in the workflow to remind yourself to set up a recurring invoice. Or with the proposals, I did a webinar a little while back on proposals and how you can kind of work around not having the ability to do that quite yet. And so you can, in a way, start a recurring invoice from a proposal, but that's going to be just some guidelines on that there. So hopefully that makes sense for you guys. The other thing that I want to talk about here that I included is what's called my recurring invoice cheat sheet. And so we'll run through this. I want to make sure to keep the webinar concise today. So we'll kind of run through this here. But with the recurring invoice, when you're setting this up, you're going to go into a project, and this is how you'll set up recurring invoicing for a client. So if you go into a project, again, if we go to the Invoices tab, right next to the invoice list is the recurring invoices section. And this is going to be where you'll set up your recurring invoice template. And if you click add, it's going to give you the parameters for how you're going to set up your template that's going to send out these invoices to the client. So what I'm going to do is, now that you know where to find that, I'm going to go back to my outline and I'm going to open this up and I'm going to talk about these here. Okay. So hopefully you guys can see this okay. But this is going to be how you'll go through and set up your recurring invoice. So the first thing we're going to talk about is going to be the starts on date. The starts on date is going to be when that invoice is created and sent every single month. So right now I have this set up where September 27th, on the 27th of every single month, it's going to get created on that date and sent out on that date. So that's important to know, that that's going to be the day that the invoice gets created and sent each month. Number two is the ends on date. If you're doing more of a subscription type service where it never ends, it's kind of just up to the client when they decide that they want to opt out, you can leave that as never and it will just continue to invoice them every single month. Or over here in the recurrent settings, you can choose if you want it to be every week or every 2 weeks. It doesn't have to be monthly, but typically that's how people invoice. But here you can decide if you want that to continue going on, or if you want to put an end date on there, you can, but the ends on will be when that recurrence stops. So that's number 1 and 2. Number 3, this is a big one that I've noticed whenever I'm on calls with people, so I wanted to highlight this as well. Number 3, whatever the total amount is on the bottom of the invoice. So we kind of already talked about the line item area. With this here, and I just want to pop over really quick to make sure that people can see this okay. Okay, perfect. I don't see anything about not able to see the screen, so I just wanted to check really quickly. So with this one here, whatever the total amount is on the bottom, that's going to be what they're invoiced every single invoice. So again, if you have a total package price, let's say and this is $200. If it's $1,000, you don't want to have it set up where the total package price is going to be your recurring invoice every single month, because this is going to be what they get invoiced every single month. So in this case, I have just a monthly service, and they're going to be invoiced the $200 every single month. So just make sure that your line items equal the monthly total that you want them to pay. Number 4, the due date. So as we talked about number one is only when the invoice gets created and sent out to the client. That doesn't mean that the invoice is due at a certain time. That's just when it gets created and sent out to the client. If you want a due date for the client, then you're going to have to set up a payment schedule that they need to follow every single month. So in this section here, I have a payment schedule set up where 3 days after the invoice has been created, that's when it's due. If you are setting this up, and if we look at this here where it says the due date, this is when the invoice is due each month. Some interesting points that you have to make sure of is you will always use after applied to invoice as your trigger if you are setting up a recurring invoice. The reason why is because after the invoice has been created is the only trigger that we have that will recur every single month. So take that into consideration when you're building that due date. You're going to use after applied to invoice every single time. It will never change. It will always be that as long as we have our system set up that way. So if we click into here again, I'll bring this back up. What this means is that 3 days after the 27th, so on the 30th of every single month, that's when the invoice is due. So every month after that invoice has been created, 3 days after, it's going to be due on that date. So in this case, it would be the 30th. The other thing here is going to be how much is due. Now, because this is a recurring invoice and we want them to pay that full invoice price every month, we want them to pay the $200 every month, you will always use 100% of the invoice. So that will never change. 2 things that will make setting up recurring invoices easy is you will always do after applied to invoice or after the invoice has been created, and you'll always do 100%. Those 2 things don't fluctuate at all. So that's going to be the amount due every single month. And then number 6 is going to be the email reminders. So let me backtrack one more time here. This is going to be when it gets created and sent. This is going to be when it's due. And then just because you have a due date there doesn't mean that the client is going to be receiving emails. The only way that they'll receive emails is if you have payment reminders set up in your payment schedule. And so here I have one that's going to be going out to them a day before it's due. And then I have another one that is if they miss their payment, there's going to be an email that goes out that says, hey, you missed your payment. So if I break all of this down, and I'll go back to my outline here, how it's set up here and I have it written into the outline if you guys are following along. The invoices will be created and sent on the 28th of each month. That's the start date. The invoices will be due on the 30th of each month, 3 days later. Or actually 28th or 27th. I have that written wrong in the outline. My apologies. It should be the 27th of each month. The invoices will be due on the 30th of each month, the due date, and a reminder will be sent out on the 29th. I guess I did write that wrong too as well. My apologies, guys. I didn't realize that was in there wrong. It should be the 26th and also on the 31st, I believe. I really apologize for this. Let me open this back up and I'll explain it through here. Sorry. So the 27th of each month there, 3 days is when it's going to be due. So that's on the 30th. Yes, I did have that right. Sorry. The 29th is when they're going to receive an email. So that's a day before the due date. And then on the 31st, a day after. So those are the 3 ones. Actually, 1, 4, and 6 are the 3 that you kind of have to pay attention to if you want to set up those due dates and reminders. So gets created and sent on the 27th. It's due on the 30th. They'll receive an email on the 29th, a day before, and they'll receive an email on the 31st, or I guess the first 2, if it's depending on what month it is, they'll receive an email if they have missed it. So that's going to be how you'll set up your recurring invoices. Again, we are going to be switching up how we do this, but currently right now, if you're needing to use it, that's how you'll go through and use it there. So I just wanted to lay that out for you. And then the last thing here, just wrapping up really quickly, is going to be implementing these invoices. So to send an invoice, we'll just go through these here really quickly. Let's say that you have an invoice that's created here. So we'll go back to our original invoice. To send this out to a client, all you'll do is you'll click send up at the top and then click send via email. And this is going to pop up the invoice that's going to be in the email to go out to the client. Okay, so that's a really quick way to, once you have your invoice created, to go and send that out to the client. The next thing, previewing an invoice. So let's say that you want to preview an invoice before you send it out to the client. What you'll do is you'll click send there again, and then you'll click open in new window. So you're still in that same section, but if you click open in new window, it'll bring up a preview of that invoice so you can look at this before you actually send it out to a client. So you have that option there. And then the third thing we'll talk about is applying a payment manually. So a lot of people, if you're not accepting payment through Stripe, Square, PayPal, let's say someone sends you a Venmo, or they do Cash App, or you receive cash or check or anything that's outside of that realm. What you can do is, if you go into the invoice and right next to the send button is apply, you can click apply payment. And if you click that, this will bring up a modal where you can go in and you can choose how they paid, how much they paid, when they paid, and that will balance out the invoice. So even if you don't accept payment through Stripe, Square, PayPal, you can still receive that payment, just come into their invoice and apply that payment manually. So if you have workflows that are set up where it's watching for an invoice to get paid, if you put in that payment, it will still trigger that workflow. So it works the exact same way. It's just if you're accepting payment through a different method, but you still need to apply a payment or balance out an invoice, you can just do that by clicking that apply button there. And then the last thing that I want to talk about here, because it's super important, is the smart field link to include an invoice in an email. How do you connect the invoice to an email? So if we go back to that email that I pulled up where you see the invoice button there, what that is that's a smart field link button. Okay, it's a smart link button. And what that's doing is it's connecting to the primary invoice on the project. So if we go into the invoice list, you'll see here where this is going to show all the invoices that are a part of this project, like we talked about earlier. With each project, there's a primary invoice for the project. And what that means is that whenever you're using the invoice smart field, or you're using invoice smart field information, or you're sending out an invoice and using the invoice link, it is always pulling from the primary invoice. Now, if you just have one invoice for a project, it will always be the primary. But if you have multiple invoices in a project, you'll need to know which one is your primary invoice. The primary invoice is going to be what invoice is included in this email if you're using the smart field link. And where you can find that at, I'm actually going to just go ahead and remove this out so you can see. If I click on smart field down here and go to the link button, this is going to give you links to different things. And if I click on the invoice link, it's going to pull up the invoice link button. That is tied directly to the primary invoice. Anytime you're using that invoice smart field link, it's directly tied to whatever invoice is marked primary. So make sure you're aware of that whenever you're sending those things out. So that's how you can include invoices in there. So those are just a couple quick things there for implementing the invoices. I know that was a little bit long of a webinar. We had a lot to cover in there, but that's just kind of a broad way of looking at invoicing within Dubsado. So hopefully that helped you guys out.